of Latino leaders confronting national and local environmental issues impacting the Latino community. Green Latinos believes that Latina communities have a right to access clean, healthy, reliable, and affordable water for drinking, recreation, economic stability, and community health. We also believe that clean water is vital to a healthy environment. Water is a human right, and unfortunately, Latina communities and other historically marginalized and underserved communities lack access in disproportionate ways. So that's just a very broad scope in terms of what we do at the federal level for the Water Equity and Ocean Program when it comes to our water equity work. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my coworker, Pedro, who is the California State Manager for our state level work in the Golden State.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Pedro Hernandez, and as Val said, I'm the California Program Manager here for Green Latinos. So along with my amazing colleagues as well too, we're making sure that California's most pressing environmental issues are addressed at the local, state, and federal level as well too. So if anyone is interested in engaging with any of our programs, feel free to reach out directly. We'll be providing our contact information more broadly, but generally, our main goal here in the program is to improve the conditions of California, which has many unique biodiversity challenges, many unique social economic challenges, and also is home to many of us as well too. So we're here to make sure that we're working intersectionally across different sectors in the broader justice movement to make sure that we can win timely and durable victories for our community. So thanks for inviting me here, Val.
Of course. And I'll pass it over to Dr. Camila Caceres, our Water Equity and Ocean Program Advocate, to get us started with our encuentro for today.
Hi, everyone. Like Val said, my name is Camila, and I work here on the Water Equity and Oceans team at Green Latinos. So we have just a quick agenda for our encuentro today. Like we just mentioned, we had a little welcome to Green Latinos. Next, we're going to do a quick icebreaker. And then we're going to get into the meat and bones, talking about, the Tijuana River, introduction of what it is, what are the issues, as well as the status of the river and conservation efforts. We're also going to highlight some federal, state, and local policy opportunities regarding the Tijuana River, as well as some call to actions. So if today's topic really is near and dear to you, touches your heart, we do want to provide some opportunities for you to get involved and voice your opinion. And then we're going to wrap it up with just questions from the audience and any member updates and announcements. Next slide. So for our icebreaker, if you want to share in the chat or unmute yourself, please share. When you think of a healthy river, what do you picture first? So in your mind, what visual comes to you? What do you think of or feel when it comes to what is a healthy river? I'll share for me. I just think usually, clear water. You usually think of, I don't know, a deer drinking by the riverbed. And so, yes, that's what I think of a healthy river. People are mentioning the presence of birds. Super important for an ecosystem. Ooh, Joanna said recreation and joy. Isn't that true when you see families and kids playing in a river? Diving into cool, clear water surrounded by trees and stones. Yes. Flowing water, no dams. That's a good one. We want to see the water running, not stagnant and smelly. Somewhere where kids can play, swimmable. Lots of green space and wildlife. Smells fresh. Yeah, smell's a big one, isn't it? Of a healthy ecosystem, you can tell right away. No levees, barriers, or water control structures. These are great answers. Bioacoustics, lots of sounds, right? You want to see a lively environment. Thank you everyone for sharing. So today we're going to touch on almost all of those topics on what is a healthy river and of course what is not. And now I'm going to pass it on to Val to introduce our speaker for today and our expert.
Yeah, thank you, Camila. So I have the pleasure of introducing our featured speaker, Ramon Chaires. Ramon is the director of the Educational and Environmental Advocacy at Un Mar de Colores, a San Diego-based nonprofit that nurtures the next generation of ocean stewards through free surf therapy, environmental education, and long-term mentorship for underserved youth. Ramon, a recognized community voice, stands with the Tijuana River Valley families confronting chronic exposure to toxic gases, cross-border sewage and pollution, and ongoing beach closures for more than 3 years. His work centers on environmental justice, community empowerment, and a vision of long-term stewardship, including the restoration and protection of the Tijuana River estuary, one of California's most vital and biodiverse wetlands. As part of the Tijuana River Coalition, an alliance of community organizations, nonprofits, and local agencies advocating for the protection and restoration of the Tijuana River Valley, he helps bridge community voices with local, state, and federal policymakers to advance long-term cross-border solutions. Un Mar de Colores, in partnership with Surfrider Foundation, has helped elevate the Tijuana River on American Rivers list of most endangered rivers for 2 consecutive years, designated second in the nation in 2025. Thank you for joining us, Ramon, and I'll give you the floor.
Hey, thank you, Val. Appreciate being here. And I definitely want to give a shout out to you and your team, to you, to Camila, to Pedro, to Olivia for having us on here, for giving us this platform and to giving us an opportunity to share important information about what's going on with our river and our region. So muchísimas gracias. Also, our co-founder is on the call is Mario Ordóñez Calderon, and he's going to be kind of chiming in case I forget anything. So if you hear a voice come out from nowhere, it's Mario chiming in. I wanted to start with this little photo of the Tijuana River Valley. As you could see, it's pretty enclosed by development on all sides. Particularly on the southern side, on the Tijuana side, which that metropolitan area houses about 2.5 million people. And that's important because of some of the things that we're going to talk about briefly. But this river valley is kind of where I grew up. I grew up right next to the border on the bottom right-hand corner. I also learned some of the basics of farming in this river valley. I learned how to surf at the oceans of Imperial Beach in South San Diego. And I just explored this river valley as a kid with my brothers and a few friends. And so this river valley has been a huge part of my life, but also has kind of helped formed my identity and also some of the work that I've been doing in the last few years. So next slide, please. So kind of Val did us a favor and talked a little bit about our mission. And I'll just hit on the fact that we're really trying to nurture the next generation of ocean and land stewards. And we do that really by connecting and playing with them first. I mean, it's all about them coming into the ocean, feeling a space of welcome, almost like a reconnection to, where their ancestors played and developed. And so we do that in collaboration with our families. And so this is a huge part of our work, and part of the reason why we really got involved with this effort and this campaign to advocate for the Tijuana River Valley had to do with us opening up a chapter in South San Diego and realizing that we didn't have anywhere to take the kids. Like, we could not take them to their own local beaches, and so that's kind of catapulted us into this space, and here we are today. Next slide. So I wanted to give you a little bit of context. This is a map of the watershed. This is probably the biggest watershed in San Diego County. It is the biggest watershed in San Diego County if you include the Mexican side, and 2/3 of the watershed is on the Mexican side, and then 1/3 on the American side. It encompasses about a little bit over 1,700 square miles. And everything from that watershed obviously leads to the lowest point, which is in the estuary. You can see the little red spots there on the estuary end. And then you can see some of the main sources of water there. On the American side, there's Lake Barrett and Lake Morena. On the Mexican side, there's the Rodriguez Dam. And so, next slide, please. And I also wanted to give you a view of what the estuary looks like, where the mouth of the river is on the American side. This is an incredibly beautiful space, incredibly biodiverse. There's somewhere around 400 different species of birds that call this place home. On the right side, you can see some of the mesas right next to the border wall. And I wanted to give you this context because this is 6 miles from the border. And if we go to the next slide, this is as soon as you cross the border. And so this is the same river valley. This is the same river. Now it's a channel. That channel was built in the 70s because Mexico was experiencing flooding problems because the city of Tijuana essentially is built on top of a floodplain. And so as the city started to grow, they started to really want to protect the economic investments being made. And so they created a channel and a whole network of channels now. If you know Tijuana, as I just mentioned, is in this river valley. So it's, it's subject to flooding all the time. But more importantly, there's canyons on both sides of the river, on both sides of the city. And those canyons are effectively moving water during times of rain. If we go back to the estuary slide, I also want to point out that this estuary is the last intact estuary in Southern California. There are no other estuaries or wetlands that are not being crossed by freeways, by a train system, or by suburban development. And so this is a jewel. And I highly encourage you to visit if you get a chance to come down to San Diego. This space is amazing. It's beautiful. I also want to point out really quickly before we move on to the next slides is that the mouth of the river right there is approximately about maybe, 75 to 100 feet wide. About 70 years ago, that mouth was approximately 1 kilometer wide, to give you an idea of how much that mouth has closed. And that has a lot to do with over sedimentation. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Next slide, please. 2 over. So here's what's coming through that river valley, through that channel, effectively. So again, I mentioned the metropolitan area of Tijuana is 2.5 million people. It's probably closer to 3. Mexico doesn't do their census except for every 10 years. And there's an incredible amount of people coming to Tijuana, right? For very obvious reasons, immigration, a better life, et cetera, et cetera. But what's being produced is a mixture of some treated wastewater, but mostly a lot of untreated wastewater, trash, sediment, and industrial pollution. We'll talk a little bit about what specifically is in that river flow. To give you an idea of what's come through the river in the last 7 years, over 150 to 160 billion gallons of transboundary pollution. And so to give you some context, if you're from San Diego County, that's enough to fill up our San Diego Bay twice over. That's how much pollution has come through there. Now that's had a huge impact on our South San Diego region economically, culturally, recreationally, ecologically. But the gist of it is here with our beaches, they've been closed for over 1,300 days. That means that all of our kids that are growing up in South San Diego County do not know what it is to have a clean beach. And more importantly, they are literally growing up with the stigma that their neighborhoods are polluted and their beaches are effectively polluted. So next slide, please. Now, one of the reasons why there's an incredible flow coming through that river has to do with economic policies between Mexico and the US. Now, Tijuana, if you know the history of Tijuana, is 100 years ago, this was a very, very small town. I'm guessing it was probably like 10,000 people in the town of Tijuana. Now, as you get closer to the 90s, the relationship between Mexico and the US economically really starts to explode alongside the border. And so when NAFTA is originally planned, you could see where the population was in 1990, but also 1995, and how much it exploded in a matter of a few years. And this also goes for different cities alongside the border, because the industrialization of cities alongside the border is effectively a byproduct of NAFTA, and why so many people from other parts of Mexico were going towards the border, not only to look for a better life on the other side of the border, but one of the draws was also better paid jobs and work in some of those cities, especially Tijuana. So you can see how much NAFTA's impact exploded the population in Tijuana. Now, what that did also was, for a city that was already behind on wastewater infrastructure and urban development, essentially providing basic social services to its residents, it put them further behind. And so Tijuana to this day has never been able to catch up to its urban development in terms of being able to provide a solid wastewater system and also a water system. You know, if you know people who lived in Tijuana, not having water a few days a week is very, very common. Very common. Most of that water is coming from the Colorado River. About 95 to 99% of Tijuana's water is coming from the Colorado River. Next slide, please. And so we're mentioning the industrial explosion. And so what you see in this photograph is on the eastern part of Tijuana, and coincidentally, what you see is where the actual channel starts, where the cement portion of the channel starts. And what you see all around it is maquiladoras, industrial zones. And they are the reason why there's a certain percentage of industrial pollutants in that channel. As I mentioned, you could see some of the mesas, you can't really see the canyons, but you definitely see some of the hillsides, and everything is flowing towards the channel. So what you have in Tijuana is effectively an open sewer, but it's more than just that. It's kind of a system that also carries away industrial pollutions. Now, it's hard to say how many maquiladoras are actually following environmental regulations, because they are in place, right? It's not like there aren't any. But there are a lot of maquiladoras that are essentially throwing their industrial waste into the network of channels, and then it ends up in the main river. Next slide, please. And where it ends up is effectively on this side of the border. Now, this isn't the best map, but you can see the riparian zones here. The bottom right-hand corner is a magnified photograph of where the arrow is pointing. And that white foam is pretty amazing to think about, the fact that you can see that foam from a satellite image. And to give you an idea of how intense that is. This is during really incredible flow right here. My guess is right during this time this photo was taken, there was approximately 40 to 60 million gallons a day flowing through the river. Now, what happens when that channel ends? In fact, if we go back, if we can go back to that slide where you see all the way back. I think it was the second, this one, there you go. The next one over. The city of Tijuana, there you go. That's where the channel, that's directly across the border. And so everything is flowing down here. The city of Tijuana sits approximately 300 feet above sea level, right by the estuary. So everything is in a downhill trajectory. But what I want you to kind of take note of here is, like, you can see some of the cars right there as they're about to cross in the left-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner. But this channel effectively ends on the other side of the border, maybe like another 100 feet, 200 feet. After that, it's all river valley. It's the path of the river. And so there's nothing to treat that water. First of all, there's nothing in place on either side of the border to treat that mixture. Main word there, mixture. Nothing can treat that mixture, right? Normal wastewater treatment plants do not have the capacity to be treating transboundary flows that have thousands of chemicals and toxins in there. They're not designed for that. It'll kill all their natural bacteria. So we can go back to the slide where we left off. Thank you so much, whoever's on slide detail. Appreciate that. And so what's coming through that, what's in that water is pretty intense. And so this is a shot of where the foam is at. And so we call this the Saturn Boulevard hotspot. Now this is actually in the river valley. And what you see there is all those toxic gases basically foaming and aerosolizing. And this is on a relatively quote unquote good day. On bad days, you can't see the water because the foam is just covering the entire section. What you see on the bottom image is also a relatively good day because you can't see a lot of that foam there. But those culverts are creating a waterfall effect. And so this is an area where there's a lot of attention now to try to eliminate that waterfall effect, so at the very least, those toxic gases are not being released into the air. On the right, of course, you can see a healthy list of all the different things that are, well, not all the different things, but many of the things that are in that water. So an array of viruses and bacteria and pathogens, heavy metals, chemicals. But I wanted to point out these two on the bottom, the PCBs, the polychlorinated biphenyls, and the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, because those are incredibly harmful. They stay in the atmosphere for a while, in the soil as well. They're mutagenic, some of them are, and they're carcinogenic, of course, and they can create reproductive harms and development delays in children. So these are all things that our neighborhoods have been exposed to. So if you go to the next slide, you see all the different neighborhoods in between the edge of Imperial Beach, which is where you see kind of like on the left-hand corner where it says Palm Plaza. That's Imperial Beach. And then kind of in the middle is the neighborhood of Nestor, which is in between Imperial Beach and San Isidro, which is on the southern part. Now, San Isidro already has poor water quality because of the hundreds of thousands of vehicles that are crossing the border. I believe the San Isidro port is the busiest port, definitely in the Western Hemisphere, maybe in the world. Don't quote me on that. But where I'm going at with this is that all these neighborhoods, the hundreds of thousands of residents that are living alongside the river, are being exposed to all this air quality, toxic air. Now, I want to make a couple of distinctions. If we go back to the previous slide, when flow is incredibly high here at this Saturn Boulevard hotspot, that's when the river is the most dangerous, because especially at night when the air density is heavier and it pushes, and a lot of those toxic gases are lighter than air, they get pushed down and they get spread out to the neighborhoods. Right? And if it's a hot day during the summer and you're trying to, cool off and you don't have AC, and a lot of these are low-income communities, many families don't have AC, and many of them don't have air purifiers, then you're essentially inviting all these gases into your home. And even if you try to seal the windows and close the doors and all this, these are toxic gases. They're going to find all the crevices in the home, and they're going to get inside your homes, right? Now, high flow isn't necessarily a given all the time. It fluctuates. Sometimes we have low flow, and recently we've had incredibly low flow because of a lot of the work that we've been doing, the advocacy work, and we'll talk about that in a second. So families just need to be aware of kind of what's happening, and the county has done a really good job of rolling out free purifiers to try to get people some support as this international kind of crisis gets taken care of, which is going to take a few years. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And this has been going on for a very long time. If you go back maybe 100 years, more recently, the last 20, 30, 40 years have been really, really bad. And specifically the last 5 to 7 years have been incredibly bad. We've seen the problem hit its climax. And now here we are with this public health crisis that's probably the worst in the country. And a river that we don't seem to have control over at the moment. So next slide, please. So this is I won't get into the nuts and bolts of this. This is kind of a diagram of the infrastructure issues. So the plumbing, because in effect, this is a plumbing problem. So like I mentioned, this is the river here on the right. That's connected to the channel. As I mentioned, none of that really gets diverted, although recently there's a effort to divert 10 million gallons from that regular flow to get treated. And you'll see that right in the smack middle of the image, there's an international treatment plant. That one's run by the IBWC, by the International Boundary and Water Commission. And that was built as a result of NAFTA. That was an agreement between both countries. So whenever you hear people say this is a Mexico issue, it's not. It's clearly not. And they knew, and I'm speaking of our government, our American government, they knew that they were going to have to put some stake in the game and help out with the treatment of wastewater because they knew there was going to be an influx of population in Tijuana. And then the other plant here, and these are not the only two plants, by the way, these are just the only two that I'm going to talk about. The one over here on the bottom left-hand corner is the San Antonio de los Buenos plant, about 5 miles south of the border. That one's been incredibly problematic as well. Now, it was in disrepair for a very long time, so there was anywhere from 30 to 45 million gallons of wastewater flowing through there consistently untreated for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. It's hard to say. It's hard to get accurate numbers on the Mexican side. What I can tell you that it was recently repaired this year. The only problem is that it's only treating about 18 million gallons a day. But there's also an equal, if not higher amount, maybe up to 25 million gallons a day that is passing through there on the side untreated, going straight into the ocean. And that's also been a huge factor in our beaches closing, because when there's a northbound current during the summer, which is when most people want to be in the water, right? It's flowing up into South San Diego beaches. Now we're about to hit the winter swells, and so that current is going to start to push it south. Either which way, whether it's the people of South San Diego County or it's the people of Playas de Tijuana, Rosarito, even Ensenada, those beaches are heavily polluted. So it's impacting residents on both sides of the border. Next slide, please. So I want to give you a brief kind of summary of MOU that was signed recently by both countries, and this MOU is important. And take it with a grain of salt, but the American government, meaning the EPA, literally went to Mexico City to sign this document. So that was a big sign. The fact that our current administration sent the EPA to Mexico to do it. And they signed that agreement with Semarnat, which is essentially their natural resources and environment and medio ambiente. Like they're the equivalent of the EPA, la Secretaria de Medio Ambiente y Recursos Naturales. So what this MOU essentially agrees to is agreements that both countries had already made before, right? Under this minute, and then the minute 328 is essentially an agreement, right? Now there's a IBWC counterpart on the Mexican side as well. It's called SILA. It's the Comisión Internacional de Límites y de Aguas. And effectively what they said is like, hey, we're gonna really recommit to our previous agreements and hold each other accountable, which is a positive sign, right? But at the same time, for a lot of critics on the ground, it's like, well, you're not really saying anything new. And for the most part, they aren't. although there are a few adjustments that they made that are giving people on the ground, especially the organizations that are doing work, some confidence that things are going to change in the very near future. And so two those things are like they're reaffirming funding commitments, which is good. And they're, according to them, they're going to be providing a little bit more transparency, so letting the public know what's happening, and they're going to hold each other accountable to infrastructure. So these things are going to play out in the very near future, because there's a lot of deadlines for these projects at the end of this year and the end of next year and the following year. And then one thing that was also incredibly new in this new MOU is that both countries are essentially agreeing to exploring water reuse strategies. Now that's important because kind of on the low, there's some desalination projects happening in Mexico that have a lot of economic and political will behind them. But we also know that that's incredibly expensive. But I think for the environmental community, it would be great to see Mexico using their water or recycling their water over. And so there's no reason why they shouldn't be, especially given that most of the transboundary pollution is Colorado River water to begin with. So it's just polluted. Okay, next slide. If you want to look up that MOU between both countries, it's very easy to find online. This is some of the work that we've been doing. Val kind of mentioned the designation. Obviously it's not a badge of honor, but we did jump from number 9 to number 2 this year. And that was incredibly important to have a national spotlight on our river 2 years in a row. And we firmly believe that part of the reason why the EPA was so involved was the collective advocacy and the collective attention that was put on this river as a result of not just the designation, but a lot of the work that's been happening on the ground in the last 5 to 7 years. And so a lot of those organizations that have been doing this work are part of this Tijuana River Coalition that we're a part of. You can see there's a lot of different organizations on both sides of the border, but also the main researchers that kind of blew the lid on toxic gases and hydrogen sulfide in the river valley. And those are researchers from the School of Public Health at SDSU, and then at Scripps Institute at UCSD, with one of the experts on aerosolization of all kinds of funky things. And her name is Dr. Kim Prather. Now, Dr. Kim Prather and from SDSU, Dr. Granados just published a recently released paper. You could find that easily as well online if you're interested in taking a look at it. And so we do a lot of advocacy work on the ground. Recently, literally like this past weekend, we were part of the second launch of a Marine Debris Leadership Academy that brings together binational organizations, trinational organizations from the region. And we're all talking about the watershed, the river, the estuary, and our ocean. And so we are really trying to follow our mission literally. Like, we're really trying to produce the next generation of ocean and land stewards. And if I had to put our work in a nutshell, that's what it is, and that's what we're doing to the best of our abilities. And we're using surfing and ecological field trips as a way to bring kids and families in. Next slide, please. I won't hit you with too much information anymore at this point, because I've talked enough. But I'll note that there's some really awesome things happening in the state of California when it comes to conservation and protecting our public lands, especially in comparison to what we're seeing from our federal administration and our government. They're taking away public lands and they're privatizing public lands. And the state of California is doing quite the opposite. And one of the things that gives me a lot of hope with where our state is going is the return of tribal lands to tribal nations. And that's, if anyone got a chance to go to the 30 for 30 summit here in San Diego a few weeks ago, that was one of the main things that I walked away with, is that our state is doing a lot to try to make things not necessarily right, but at the very least to acknowledge that land has been taken and there's initiatives to give land back. And so that was incredibly inspiring. And a lot of these projects are going to be funded by this proposition that passed last November, Proposition 4, where there's $10 billion they're going to go towards climate action initiatives, including 30 for 30 projects. Next slide, please. So one of the main places where you can really help right now is sending a letter to the State Water Board. So the State Water Board already has 46 million that was allocated to them through these Prop 4 funds, but they haven't made a decision, and it feels like they're sitting on this, not quite sure what to do. There's a couple of rivers in that they're considering allocating those funds to. One of those rivers is our river in San Diego. The other one is the new river in Imperial Valley. Now, I'm not here to tell you which one's more important. All I can tell you is that we could really use those dollars in the Tijuana River Valley for a lot of different projects. This is kind of just a sample, a letter that you can start with. Val, I'm assuming that you're going to share the slide deck with the group. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's an email there where you can send this out to. Okay. Next slide, please.
I'll go over this one. Thank you, Ramon.
Yeah.
So another call to action besides, specifically writing a letter to the California State Water Board is just to call your local representatives. Great if they're in California, but even if you're out of state, this is a national issue, binational. So we do want as many elected representatives to be aware of this issue and to be supportive. So the first thing you can do is just identify your representatives. You can go to congress.gov and there's a tab that says find your members. You're going to put your zip code in and it'll come out with a list of the people that are elected in your zip code. The second step would just be to make a phone call. This will literally take maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Hopefully half the time someone on the staff picks up the phone call and you can tell them your message. And about half the time, you're just going to leave a voice message. And so just be mindful that if you do leave a voice message, a lot of them do have like a 30-second cutoff. So you don't want to be too lengthy or too complicated if you do leave a voice message. And urge them to act. We do have a sample script in the next slide that we can also send in our follow-up email. Feel free to edit that as it fits you. And of course, just stay informed. Like going to encuentros like this one or, following the news to make sure that you keep updated with anything Tijuana River. Next slide. So this is just a sample that, again, you can mention on the phone, leave a voicemail, or you can also email them. So just like you did the letter to the water board, you can send them an email to your local representatives. We really do want to, make sure as many people's eyes are on this. And this is just a sample. Again, make sure you don't make it too long. If there's anything specific you want to add, please feel free. If you want to make it shorter, of course, also feel free. But pretty much you're just saying that the Tijuana River is an important social and environmental issue, and that you just want to make sure that they get the proper funding so that they can restore this ecosystem and help the surrounding communities. And then I will pass on to the next slide for Val for another call to action.
Yeah. So the last call to action that we have here is that there is a Surfrider petition to declare a national emergency for the public health crisis at the US-Mexico border. We have the QR code there, as well as I'm dropping the link to the petition here. And as you can see, it's a request to appeal to President Trump to fulfill his commitment to protect the environment, clean water, military personnel, and national security and public safety for all people, and outlines the ongoing issues on the US-Mexican border. So about 1,895 people have signed. The goal is to get to 2,000. So if you're interested, please sign that petition. And every little, action helps in terms of making sure that we're protecting our water and oceans as well as public lands.
Great. And so now we're going to open it up for Q&A from our attendees. If you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself, please do so. Or if you want to share your question in the chat. Any questions for Ramon or the Tijuana River? Okay, well, some questions come in. I have one. So you showed us on our graph that, the population started increasing around the 90s. Is that how long the pollution has been an issue, would you say?
No, there's been pollution issues for, you can go back 100 years to see like when the first, spills kind of came through. And I think one thing I always go back to, like, the topography of Tijuana with canyons on both sides of the city and this floodplain in the middle. And this is an intermittent river, so it shouldn't be flowing all year long. It should only be flowing during the rainy season. But if you see pictures of the river, it's pretty incredible how much water was flowing through there before, which makes sense when you think about some of the earliest, documented moments when the river essentially was polluting South San Diego. And so I think there's always been wastewater issues in the city of Tijuana going back to its very, very beginning. But in the last 30 to 40 years, it's been a real issue. It's just been more prevalent, and it's kind of slowly like grown from decade to decade. And this was the year where it just kind of hit a peak where all the infrastructure in Tijuana was aging, pipes were breaking because most of the canyons are now populated. There's no more natural vegetation on those canyons to hold water. So then every time it rains, there's, overwhelming amount of sedimentation coming through the river. And that sedimentation impacts all the different collectors, all the different pipes. It blows up the pumps. It's just a huge issue on top of the transboundary pollution, right? So.
Thank you, Ramon. Any other questions from the audience? If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, jump in. I'm happy to answer some questions. I also want to kind of recognize the role of Surfrider in helping us out. When we partnered up with Surfrider a few years ago, I don't think we really understood what the impact would be. We were hoping for impact, but they've been incredible partners. And one of their staff members is here, Joanna Guerra. She wants to say hello. She's been great. So thank you, Joanna, for being here.
No, yeah, of course. And Mara Diaz is also here, who's our clean water manager at the national level. But yeah, it's been an honor and a pleasure working with Un Mar de Colores, and I think it just shows the impact of collaboration that two, community partners can make at the national level, right? I grew up in San Diego, born and raised, and it's exciting to see that this issue is now reaching the national level and the attention that it deserves. So there's pressure on all governments, right, officials to make change, because this community has been suffering and struggling for over 10 years, and it's just getting worse and worse. So yeah, thank you, Ramon and Mario, for all of your efforts and trusting also a partnership with Surfrider to make change happen.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you so much for joining us. Any other questions? I have another question, whether Ramon or Mario or even Pedro, who's been there, if you want to share a little bit what it's like to be there. I mean, I've heard about, during our icebreaker. We talked about healthy ecosystems smell really good. So if you want to share just like what it's like to be there, what it smells like, what it looks like, yeah, how it's affected the communities. I mean, some schools have been shut down. If anyone wants to share a little bit about that, just what it feels like to be there.
Yeah. See if Mario wants to jump in.
Yeah,
I grew up there, so I can talk about the river all day. Go for it, Mario.
I can chime in a little bit. It's great to be on this call, and thank you so much for your time and attention. Definitely, I have the privilege of living up in North County, San Diego, so like the day-to-day exposure is limited, but the times that I do go down there, I mean, I walk away with in particular when we're leaving the hotspot, I walk away with like a headache that lasts all day. And it's incredibly disappointing and sad to know that there's elementary schools about a quarter mile away from that hotspot. And when we do these community conversations, Ramon and I have had a really interesting uh, working relationship with the coalition of the Tijuana River, where we're predominantly some of the only folks that are bilingual, and we've hosted those bilingual educational workshops for the community members. And the folks that come out are people who are concerned about their kids. That's what starts to reign true, is like people wondering, like, is it safe for my son to play baseball when we're smelling the hydrogen sulfide, or yeah, hydrogen sulfide, remember?
Mhm.
And those are the kinds of concerns we have to hold and like elevate and raise, and what I'm recognizing is there's a lot of incredible advocates and organizations in the space doing their bit, but it could start to feel like an isolated in an isolated echo chamber if we don't continue to have these kinds of conversations and lean on partners like Green Latino to elevate it. So today we have approximately 18 attendees, but that's 18 or 20 more attendees than we had yesterday, and from I'd imagine all over California, all over the nation, and we're just incredibly grateful for that, because that mom's concern now is being elevated into this platform here, and yeah, it's incredibly unfortunate. And the more and more leaders we can get to visit that hotspot, the more and more people are going to realize, like, oh no, this is incredibly wrong on a human level, right? So
Thank you so much, Mario. And yeah, we will also be uploading this to our YouTube channel. We do get quite a few more views there as well from people who weren't make it, or if you were late today, you can watch the whole thing from the beginning on our YouTube. Any last questions before I pass it off to Val to wrap it up?
Well, I have a question for the group, and if you all wouldn't mind just adding your answer to the chat, how many of you have actually been to the river valley? Right. Colorado. Joseph says yes. Cassandra visited. Yeah, I would love to hear from Joseph and Cassandra, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear what your thoughts or impressions were when you were there. Adrian has been there as well. That's cool. Interested in how folks across the country. Cassandra, give me a minute. Sure. How folks across the country are working to improve ecosystems. That's a really good question. So I'll share a quick story, because we had an eco field trip in the river valley this Saturday, and obviously we didn't take our kids to the hotspot, but we took them to Borderfield State Park, which is also a spot, and it's literally in the corner of the country, like right next to the fence. And it was for a lot of the families and the kids, it was their first time being that close to the border fence, but also it was the first time that they were in the river valley. And it was really cool to hear about some of their reactions to not just the border wall, but also what was kind of coming through the river, but also seeing how beautiful that space is. And we had a person come in, a falconer come in with a bird, and that bird was the kind of highlight of the day for the kids. The bird got the most shout outs out of everyone. But we wanted to bring in a falconer because of the amount of birds that are inside that river valley. So there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's nearly 400 birds. And so it was really cool for the kids to see that and just experience that and be there. So we were really happy to provide that experience.
Hi, everyone. Hola, Ramon. Thank you for inviting me to respond here. We were just on a panel, so we shared a little bit more of our stories, and I think I had the opportunity to share more about my connection to Imperial Beach. But I love that you bring up the Borderfield State Park because, well, I work for Latino Outdoors, and one of our first outings what the chapter developed here in San Diego, we took folks out to Borderfield State Park, up to Friendship Park. That is it's such a beautiful space. It's sort of, not too many people know about it. But it's like all the ecosystems that are there present. There's just such an abundance and beauty in this small place. And yet, with the border and everything else, the political landscape, it is also a heavy space. I think my first visit was for a Fandango Fronterizo event back when it was just initiating, 14, 15 years. Oh, they just had their 17th annual. So I think it was the first or second one that when I first visited the space. And since then it became a favorite part. But yeah, different years going to visiting the spaces, you can see how it's changed. One, in just the wildlife that you find dead on the beach, to the smells. Sometimes you can smell it. There's been years where there are heavy smells and there's other years where you can't. But one thing is visiting there, we've never been able to get in the water. At least it's always been a caution, which is heartbreaking because there's this beautiful beach and you see people on horseback. And then of course you see other folks in their uniform riding through with their four-wheelers, not being respectful of the ecosystem. So all of that intertwined, it's just I think a heavy space, both in its beauty and both in what is happening to the devastation and of the ecosystem. And what else can I say? It's again, like Joanna mentioned, I am happy that it is receiving more of there's more national attention, because it's like the farthest corner of the country. They're bordering Mexico. And I think one other thing I'll add that I think impacted one is being there with a Fandango Fronterizo. You're there in that space, sharing with the ecosystem, music, even that space has changed. This year, they didn't have the event at Friendship Park. It was just on the Tijuana side. And where was I going with that? Oh, at one of the events that we had with Latino Outdoors, there was a family that joined us, and it just became so impactful because we did engage with the participants that were there, asking them how they connect, what that place means to them. And there was a family there, and he talked about like visiting, going to that space like on a weekly basis with his parents, how they were before the border wall was even there, how they could just cross easily back and forth. And it was actually a space where they would spend the weekends there, where they would go out and picnic. I'm like, but you don't see that anymore. You don't see that anymore. And you go up north to as it hits Imperial Beach, and those are some things you don't see. I think one thing I wanted to bring up, and this will be the last thing I'll say, is that there used to be the sand castle competitions. Like, is that still happening? I was away from San Diego for a couple of years, so I don't know if that's still happening, but that was another amazing event that would happen there. I'm sure that now, because of the pollution and all the effects, everything in the air and the water, that maybe that is not taking place anymore. So I don't know if anybody can add to that, but again, another beautiful community event that would bring everybody down to Imperial Beach, right? Because everybody visits La Jolla and Pacific Beach and maybe even more north, all the beautiful beaches, but to be able to bring community and gather and share in that space, like I think that's just another loss that we've had there of gathering and enjoying the ocean, right? Our connection to the water there.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra. Appreciate that.
Pedro, if you're able to, I see in the chat you mentioned something unique of when you were able to visit the river valley was some of the military presence. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience there and maybe expand on that as well.
Sure. Yeah, well, first of all, I was on an amazing tour, facilitated by Ramon and lots of other amazing partners down working on the Tijuana River. So that was, I got to say that one of the tours that left me with the most impression in terms of just learning about um, so many different like angles to Tijuana River as well. But one thing again, so just on behalf of Green Latinos, right? Like we do monitor the different roles that immigration enforcement and just, policing in general have played in, making our communities comfortable or just more broadly with the Los Angeles immigration enforcement raids as well too, specifically them targeting parks. Um, so the kind of like intersection of federal military and police presence with access in just general is something that like we really care about and try to stay on top of. And again, what was really unique about the Tijuana River is that it's literally like right along the border as well too. So, you know, there was like border patrol agents, doing some sort of training or kind of monitoring as well too. And I caught that I had a pair of binoculars and I was watching them and they were watching me. That's one good thing about being a birder is you get to see other things. But also, there was one of the participants of our tour tried going up into the fence, and there was about, I want to say maybe a probably 50 or 60 foot kind of buffer area where I guess people are not able to actually go. So you can get up to 50 or 60 feet close to the border wall on the kind of side of Friendship Park as well too. And so someone just like took like one step over the imaginary line and they turned on their sirens for about a second or two. So there was a very like um soft but definitely present observance of our activity, even though we were kind of just being nature nerds and learning about the area. And then also just like something, and I say this as somebody who lives in, the beautiful city of Fresno, California, so I'm definitely more inland. There was also lots of like helicopter presence as well too, from I'm gonna say is the Navy, and also a couple of military vessels as well too. So it just also, I think that was a really unique, um, just overall like one thing that characterizes the region as well too. And more broadly, from our program, we're watching the ways that the Trump administration is trying to weaken federal land protections in order to facilitate more border patrol activities as well. So I think what is happening on the Tijuana River is a kind of interesting case study, and they're trying to replicate that heavy of a presence just more broadly around protected areas on the borderlands as well. So, we've been opposing different legislation like the Flash Act, and Senator Lee out of Utah introduced a proposal to weaken borderland protections as well last week. So it is actually something that is very live in the policy arena as well too. But I imagine it is also a deterrent for certain vulnerable communities to recreate more regularly in the area as well.
Absolutely, Pedro, absolutely.
Do we have any more questions, thoughts, or comments? We do have a little bit of extra time, so I'm really vibing the discussion base that's happening here. So if I'll give folks like some time in case they want to jump into the conversation.
Yeah, while people are thinking about that, I will say, just to build on what Pedro and Cassandra mentioned, yeah, that region has always been policed. There's always been a border patrol presence. In the one thing I mentioned during tours is that the Tijuana River Valley used to be one of the main corridors for immigrants coming from Latin America and coming into the United States. So we were either crossing or getting stuck. And during the 90s, when they, started planning on creating these giant walls across the border line, they effectively, U.S. policy effectively pushed immigrants towards the deserts, thinking that that would discourage people from crossing. And of course, that did not have the effect that they intended. And so now we have, tens of thousands of people literally disappearing in the desert because those conditions are so harsh. So it pushed people away from crossing the Tijuana River Valley. And so, yeah.
Well, thank you for that elaboration on the conversations, and thank you so much, Ramon and Mario, for giving us insights in terms of the ongoing issues on the Tijuana River, as well as folks from Surfrider for being able to make the call today, and for providing one of the calls to action that we have. So I have some tarea, plot twist, for y'all after this call. So they're just calls to action here. If you want to continue to make sure that we can push towards a cleaner Tijuana River. And so the first one is to write a letter. Ramon is right. We'll make sure to send out the slide deck, but I'm also putting it in the chat here in case you want to make sure that you have the email to send it out to, as well as the subject line to the State Water Resource Control Board. The second is to call your representative. If you don't know what their number is, go to congress.gov to find your representative and their contact information, and let them know about the importance of the Tijuana River. Even if you're not California based, this is something that you can still make an impact on, right? And as Ramon mentioned, if you live in the Colorado River Basin, right, like you could bring that forth as well. So making sure that we're holding our representatives accountable, and also furthering our river champions in Congress. And then the last is to sign the Surfrider petition to declare that national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border. So I leave those there, for y'all to continue. And please make sure to follow us. And if you wanted to get into contact with any of us, whether that's myself, Camila, Pedro, or Ramon, could we go to the next slide, please? I will share our contact information there. And so, of course, if you also want to find other ways to get involved in terms of advocacy, I know Pedro mentioned public lands. We also have at Green Latinos a climate Justice and Clean Air program, as well as the Sustainability Communities program, please become a member. The QR code is right there. If you need the website, it's greenlatinos.org/join. And so you'll be able to become a member, and then you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Green Latinos. If you want a California specific, add _CA for California specific Green Latinos Instagram page. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thank you so much for Un Mar de Colores and Surfrider for joining us, as well as Latino Outdoors. Shout out to all our friends. So thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Camila, Pedro. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you all.